Welcome to From the Deep. I am Mike the Finder.
And I am Book of Brett.
And today we're going to be talking about the Amazon original from 2022, the possibly
Tender Bar.
worst named movie ever, The Tender Bar.
I feel like if you don't have context on why it's called that, like once you watch the movie, you figure out why it's called that.
Yeah.
But until then, it's weird. It sounds like it could be anything.
It's a bad name.
It's pretty.
It makes sense once you've seen it, but
yeah. Even after you've seen it, though, it's still not a great name.
Well, it's not a memorable title either. That's the biggest problem I have with it. So today we are going to be talking about that. So let's just start off with the synopsis. Do you want to give us a synopsis of this movie, like always?
Yeah. Should we just do this like the regular IMDb synopsis, or should I just give one?
Just give one.
So this is a movie about an aspiring author, kind of following him from like childhood to adulthood, and it's got like some coming of age kind of elements to it. And it's basically about him just kind of dealing with his family, his relationships, and just kind of how he's progressing through it and kind of the things he goes through along the way. It's not like there's not a huge amount to do here as far as the synopsis goes. It's pretty straightforward, but I feel like there's a lot more going on here than just simply saying he's going from childhood to adulthood and dealing with family issues along the way. Would you say that's about right?
I think it's really how somebody becomes a writer, and less about telling the entire story of someone's life, but also kind of doing that at the same time. It sits in a weird place, I think, because
it does, because like I said, it's got a lot of coming of age elements to it, but I would not call this a coming of age movie.
Not at all.
It kind of reminded me of there's a movie from the 90s that's kind of like this. It's like The Big Something, or I cannot remember the name of it, but it kind of reminded me of that, of just like, at least the beginning of it is very much about his family, and it slowly progresses into what's going on with him more than just his family. Like the family is there to kind of show where he's coming from and early complications, and to show him, I think it's an element of him overcoming issues that are just kind of forced on him from the beginning of his life. And I think that's why you have a lot of the family issues there, to just kind of like show that he's overcoming obstacles. But the thing I really liked about it was that these are obstacles that I feel are very relatable. Yeah. And that's why that's one thing that I really liked about it. And as I was watching it, it made me realize, like, these are the kinds of movies that I really like. Like, there are a lot of different kinds of movies that I like, but this is it felt grounded. It felt realistic. It felt relatable. And not that I grew up in a family quite like as distorted as his is, but I liked that it felt relatable, and it felt like you were just seeing the lives of people play out, and I really like movies like that.
Yeah, I feel the same way. The reason I love movies like Sideways is because of that same reason, and you do have that here. This is a very character-driven film, and it's not necessarily about a thing that happens the way sort of most movies are, like about a bank heist, or like, it's not really about that. And that's kind of, I think, what it does best is it's not about a thing that happens. And you could argue it's about somebody becoming a writer, but it's sort of these moments, I think, it's kind of more about a writer looking back at his life and picking out these moments, these important moments in his life, about what drove him to exactly the point that he's at now, writing the thing that you're reading and or watching.
Well, and even though there's like, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, I was just going to say, the reason I enjoyed this movie so much is because some of my favorite movies are Sideways and Ghost World, and movies like that, where it is all sort of character driven, and the struggle that you see isn't necessarily environmental. It's it really comes more from within and maybe from
Right.
your family, because the family is kind of the hurdle that you have to jump to become this thing that you want to become. And
Well, it's the hurdle, but it was also almost like the propelling force.
yeah, and I think there's a really sweet moment. We are going to get into spoilers in this whole thing, so if you do not want to hear spoilers, go ahead and check out. But there's this really sweet moment where I think everything sort of fell into place for me, where he gives his mom his ring from Yale.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that scene is important because it's almost like, there, I did this for you. I did this for you. And it's not necessarily,
and now we're sharing in it together.
Right. It wasn't necessarily all for me. And that's sort of what cements this movie as something that's more than just sort of your typical Garden State kind of a movie. And
right. It's not as selfish, because I feel like when you have a lot of these movies, it's the obstacles are being overcome for the benefit of the main character.
Yeah.
And depending on the movie and the story, it makes sense. But at the same time, I think he kind of recognizes throughout the movie, you really get the sense that he recognizes that the faults in the family are also kind of the things that hold the family together, or they exist, but it's not what defines the family. And
Yeah.
I think that was what hit me so hard about this movie, was you do have, like, from the very beginning, I liked this movie from the very beginning, because it was clear to me that this was going to be about real life struggles that, I mean, and granted, it's based on a memoir, so there is that. It's this family that has these, you know, they have their issues, and they even have like their conflicts between one another, but despite all of that, none of it's bad enough to break the family apart. And it almost is part of why the family is so close, because they recognize these faults in each other, but it helps them kind of exist together.
Well, I got to tell you, man, movies like this is the kind of thing that I watch movies for. And this is the sort of experience that is the reason that I love movies.
Yeah,
and
it was really refreshing, especially in this day and age of high fantasy and superhero movies. It was really also refreshing.
The thing I think I liked most about it is a lot of these movies tend to be sort of edgy and jaded and have a really sort of negative outlook on the world around them.
Yeah.
And the thing I liked about this is that even though all of these negative things are happening around JR, he almost always, there are moments of sadness in this movie for sure, but he almost always tends to sort of overcome it.
Right.
And for the sole purpose of becoming a writer. And
right.
That's what I think I like the most about it. It's not jaded, and it's not necessarily angry at the world. And it's sort of, a lot of movies have this tendency to sort of zoom out and be like, see, the world is a shitty place. And this movie, I feel like, kind of does a really good job of sort of staying zoomed in on what exactly is keeping him going and what is making him going into being a writer and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, and the thing I really liked about it is a lot of times in these movies when they try to do these like huge gaps in time, because I mean it does start out with him being a child and it ends at the end of him going and pursuing his career. Yeah. And the thing I think this movie did so well is not making that feel fragmented. It didn't feel like we got these big leaps in time.
It does sort of feel like that the first time they do it, but I feel like that's only
when they go to him on the train.
Yes, and I feel like that's only because the part when he's a kid is so long. It's like the first 30 or 40 minutes of this movie, and then they shift over. So it's sort of jarring that first time, but after that, I think you're right. It's not it's not jarring at all after that.
I still think that, yeah, you're right. There is that moment where it's like, wait, what is going on here as far as like jumping forward? But at the same time, you don't get this. I feel like when a lot of movies do this, like biopics are a great example. I feel like what was the last one I watched? Not J. Edgar Hoover. The Motley Crue movie is a great example of it being really fragmented because, or the Freddie Mercury movie, or the movie about Queen, where it's basically just kind of going from like one big moment to the next, and it feels like you're just jumping from one moment to the next. And this felt like each moment, even though you're jumping from one to the other, it's not fragmented other than that first time. And I think that it's because it ties so well into each other. And it doesn't feel like you're jumping from one big moment to the next. It gives you this feeling of, okay, this is where this guy is, and we're learning about where it came from, and then it proceeds to tie it in really well together.
Well, that actually leads me sort of into one of my first small little problems with it, is that the narrator comes in at the beginning, is there for half a second, a little bit later, he disappears throughout the entire middle of this movie, and then he sort of comes back toward the end.
Yeah.
And I feel like that you could solve exactly what you're talking about and what I'm saying in that first jump with more of that, and kind of helping us understand what's happening a little bit more in his brain, because there are moments in this where it's really hard to read how he's feeling. And
well, narration's kind of finicky that way, because narration's one of those things where you really have to find a good middle ground, or it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though. It's not there enough in this.
Yeah.
And
no,
and
you're
I
right.
feel
You're
like
right.
I feel like if you put it a little bit more in the middle, I think it would help tie all of that stuff together a little bit more. But that's such a small problem that I had with it. That I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Well, and speaking of issues with this movie, I only really had like 2 issues with this movie. One of them was just kind of nitpicky, and the other one is just kind of a, I feel like it's almost like a form of like PTSD, like relationship PTSD. The first issue I had that was nitpicky was the whole thing feels super underexposed. And I don't know if that was just me, and I'm totally willing to think that that's just me, but I mean, did you agree or no?
Well, so I have a big issue with how this movie is color graded. It's
lit and graded almost like a horror movie.
Well, it's so orange and teal that it bothers me so much, and I don't like the orange and teal look. But I think that sort of plays in to what you're talking about. I tell you what, though, as much as I don't like orange and teal, the orange color of it makes it feel like we're in the 70s. It makes everything feel sort of cigarette stained and coffee stained and everything. You know what I mean?
So, grungy a little bit.
Yeah. But I don't know if that's... I don't know if it's underexposed because they shot it kind of the way they wanted it to, even though they could have kind of got that same outcome with doing it in post, but I don't know. I didn't notice that, but I
think know. I think that goes back to the grading as well. I don't think it looks underexposed because it was shot underexposed. I think it's because
they're trying to add grain to it.
Yeah, you're not going to shoot a movie underexposed anyway. I mean, even a really dark horror movie is going to be well lit so that you're getting enough light on the sensor,
right? And
then you're going to bring it down in post. But again, that was one of those things where like I noticed it, and at first I was kind of like, I don't like that, but again, it never took away from the movie for me. There were just certain parts, like there's one part where they're in the bar, and it's after one of the many times Sydney breaks up with him, and there's this side profile shot of Ben Affleck and JR. I can't remember the actor's name. I looked it up. It's like something Sheridan. But Charlie and JR are talking, and it's just a super dark scene. Like, it's super dark. And I understand it's supposed to be like a dark bar, but it just felt too dark to me. But again, it was something that I was like, okay, I recognize that I don't like it, but that doesn't mean it's bad or good, or it takes anything away from the movie. It's just a preference thing. The other thing that really,
I mean, that may just sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
That may just be what they wanted, because that bar feels dark. Their house is sort of the same way. It feels like it's nighttime when it's broad daylight outside.
Right.
Like when the grandfather is getting dressed in that suit, it's the middle of the day. And in that house, it looks like it's the middle of the night. So there are definite moments in that. And I think that may just be what they wanted. They may have just wanted this to not be lit super brightly because of the vibe that they were trying to get out of it.
Right.
So,
yeah. Now, the other issue I had with this movie, which again was more me, I think I just hated her character, was Sydney.
Yeah, she's awful. She's awful.
And not so much just her. I mean, don't get me wrong, I hated her as a character. She's an awful person. She's stringing him along. But the part that rubbed me so wrong was his just need to get her after being pushed away so much, because it's almost pathetic how bad he wants to keep going back to her.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I remember being younger and feeling the same way in certain relationships of like when she's pushing you away, or it's a very toxic relationship, but still wanting to go for the girl. And so that's why I say it's almost like this, like it might almost be rooted in just relationship PTSD from when I was younger, and maybe having grown past that as an adult and recognizing how ridiculous it is to just keep chasing her. But it also had that vibe of The Social Network, where he's just doing, I was really worried that they were going to go into the realm of he's just trying to succeed to get the girl. And at a certain point, he does go through that phase, but it is just a phase. He eventually goes past it.
Yeah.
And that was something that I was like, okay, thank God, because I was really worried that this was going to just devolve into him just trying to get the girl. And that would have just broken this movie for me. But it did a really good job of, I think, portraying that like young love. I despite seeing all the red flags and warning signs, you still want to get the girl because she's the one. And so in retrospect, I think it did a good job of that.
Well, I was worried a little bit about that too, because for a really long time, for the first hour or so, I was like, I don't understand where this is going. Because there's a lot of these seemingly insignificant moments that don't necessarily become important until later. And at the same time, there's a lot of moments that I wanted to see more of, like his relationship. They kind of skip from first night they meet to completely obsessed with this girl. And there is no reason for me as somebody watching this to understand why he's obsessed with her. And I think if we had spent more time at the beginning of their relationship, like seeing them get to a stage of like actually kind of dating a little bit more than just having sex in her parents' house. I feel, and then she immediately wakes up the next morning and goes, "I shouldn't have brought you to Christmas because, you know,
they think I'm seeing someone else."
Right.
Yeah, but again, that's when you really get the first sign of what an awful person she is.
Yeah.
You also get your next sign when you get to meet her parents, and you get to go, "Oh, you're awful because you come from awful human beings."
But that's the thing though, is that I feel like I understand maybe in real life, him and this girl may have been how it went. But as somebody watching this movie, what I would have done as a writer is I would have made the audience kind of fall in love with her a little bit. Instead of making her a terrible person the whole time, I feel like what we needed is to sort of fall in love with her, with him, and then see her do that and maybe go back to Stinky or whatever his name is. and then we sort of see him chase after her. And I think it would have made a little bit more sense how obsessed he was and why he did go through this phase of trying to realign his entire life to get her back. So
yeah. Well,
because it just doesn't make sense the way it's all put together, why he would realign his entire life when really they just had sex one time. And you know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I'm wondering if a big part of making her awful the whole time was kind of to give us his perspective and to let us see her from his perspective.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Sorry, go ahead.
Because I mean, no, I think if you spend more time on the relationship at the beginning and then she's awful, it makes her even more awful, which arguably isn't a bad thing at all. But I think by making her seem awful the whole time, it really gives us an insight into how he viewed the relationship, as viewing her as more bad than good.
But it also makes him look, like you said, pathetic. And I think
it totally does. It totally does.
And I think that's the biggest issue with it. It's not understandable. And I get sometimes when somebody falls in love with someone else, it doesn't make sense to everyone else and seemingly from the outside. And that may have been what they're trying to push there.
Right.
But she's just so unlikable, and she's such a weak reason to get him to do some of the things that he does. That's my biggest problem with it.
Yeah, no,
it's sort of grabbing it's the lowest hanging fruit there that you could get. Like, oh, and he has a failed relationship, and that's why he becomes a writer at the Times. Like what?
Yeah,
I don't know.
But like I said, that again, this all goes back to what I was saying. It's one of the two things I disliked about this movie. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's always going to be something that you're going to dislike about a movie.
Yeah,
and I think
and that's also by design. She was written that way by design to make you feel that way. So
yeah, it's not like they took the first draft and they're like, "Yep, that's her."
Right.
Speaking of characters and the actors, I gotta say, I love Ben Affleck in this movie.
You know,
I love his character. I love the way he acted this character out. And I would not say I'm like a huge Ben Affleck fan, mostly because I have not seen a ton of Ben Affleck movies, at least not a lot that come to mind right away. But I really liked him in this movie.
Yeah, I did too, and we still haven't touched on who directed this. This was directed by George Clooney, and admittedly, I am not a big fan of George Clooney or Ben Affleck. And so when we went into this, you chose this movie this week, and when we went into this, I was kind of nervous based on who had directed it, because I've never seen. I don't know what he's directed before or whatever. I don't remember specifically seeing something that George Clooney has directed before.
He directed the last sci-fi movie he was in. I can't remember the name of it, but he directed that, and that was really good too.
Okay. But I've never seen anything he's directed. So I was really nervous. And to be honest, I don't really care for Ben Affleck. I don't not have an opinion on him. I don't care for him generally. I think he's kind of a weak actor, generally speaking. Yeah. He kills it in this movie.
Yeah. He really does.
He is a completely different person. And I do not see Ben Affleck in there at all. At all. Like, I was actually blown away at how good he was. Christopher Lloyd's pretty good in it too. I was hoping he might have had a bigger part in this, but he, it is what it is. But yeah, dude, Ben Affleck kills it. It's almost incredible. And you know what? The kid kills it too. That kid is good. Yeah, him, JR, when he's a kid, that kid is so good.
Yeah, he really is.
And I didn't generally, when I watch movies with kid actors, it's kind of like unbelievable. Generally, the way they.
It either goes one direction or the other. They either kill it or you just wish they'd get off screen.
Yeah, and I didn't have one of those moments at all this time where I felt like that kid is acting.
The casting director did an amazing job on this.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing is that it's such a good example of what can happen when everybody that's involved is good at what they're doing, because every aspect of this movie is well done. I mean, it's lit well, it is shot well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot of crazy cinematography going on in this, but that's because it's so story driven. It's not driven by the cinematography. It's so story driven, and that's what I think I loved so much about it, is you can feel how well written it is while you're watching it. Every scene, like you said, even the scenes that you said there's a lot of scenes in here that as they're happening, some of them don't seem like they really mean anything, but every scene in this movie is saying something.
Yep.
Every scene in this movie is getting something out of the character. It's adding something to the way that it's driven. It's adding something to the story, which goes to show how well directed it is, how well shot it is. I mean, it's just I was surprised at how much I actually liked this movie, because I was expecting to. Well, I wasn't really expecting anything, actually. I got to say, I really went into this expecting it to go one way or the other, because of Ben Affleck being in it, because of it feeling, it had a lot of mainstream, high-budget aspects to this movie as far as who was involved in it.
Yes,
And
it did.
that can go wrong real fast, because when you have a lot of high-profile people, you have a lot of money on the line. And this movie doesn't seem like it wasn't made with the intention of making money. It was made with the intention of telling a story. And that's what I think made it such a good movie.
I think that, I want to see what the Rotten Tomatoes score is for this, because on Amazon, this is rated really well by everybody that watches it and leaves a review.
Yeah, and it's SAG nominated too.
So the critics have this at 52%. The audience has this at 73%. And I think
that seems low to me.
That's really low, but I think this is what it is. Critics, this is not a commercially viable movie. This is going to go over, and I don't mean intellectually. I just mean as far as entertainment value. This is going to go over a lot of people's heads, I think.
I think that's kind of indicative. Again, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say that this is not for everyone. This movie is for film nerds and made for people that really enjoy a little bit stuff that's a little more high-minded. And that's okay. But what it also means is that, generally speaking, critics are usually a little bit harsher on movies like this because they try to do something that's a little bit more high-minded, and because this is a 73%. That actually doesn't surprise me, because it's not for everyone.
I think that goes back to what we were talking about of it being kind of refreshing in the realm of movies that we have right now. I think it's going to get a lower, as far as the viewer side of things, I think it's going to have a lower rating, because unfortunately we're in a time right now where people want flash. They want a lot of action. We're just oversaturated with superhero movies. And so when something like this comes out, it's not like that. This is a movie that belongs in the 90s and the early 2000s so much.
Yeah, this is a very 2003-esque movie. I feel like. Go ahead.
This has the family version of High Fidelity written all over it, and I feel like High Fidelity was the same when it came out. It wasn't a highly talked about movie. It wasn't insanely popular, but now if you talk to somebody about High Fidelity, people have watched High Fidelity. It's held in really high regard. Chasing Amy was the same way. Chasing Amy was an amazingly well done movie, but it wasn't talked about a lot. And now you go forward in time, and a lot of people have seen Chasing Amy. And when people talk about movies like this, they don't talk about it in the sense of it fitting in some lore. They don't talk about about the action sequence. They talk about it in the way that it hit them, in the way that it affected them. And like you said, this is why we watch movies. This movie was made for people that like to watch movies that have depth in it. And I don't mean that as in, I mean, I'm sure people that watch the Avengers movies can enjoy this movie, but you're not going to enjoy it for the same reasons that you enjoy the Avengers or your superhero movies. You're going to enjoy this because of the way that it affects you.
Well, I got to tell you, man, it's refreshing to hear you speak well of a movie that's a bit more high-minded like this. Because I feel like if I had asked you to watch this a couple years ago, you'd have called it pretentious art nonsense.
Well, and I think
because generally in the past you have been more big-budget popcorn type movies. Yeah, and this is something that I think kind of bridges the gap for that. In a lot of ways.
Yeah, it does. Because it's done, like you said, in a very high-minded way, but it doesn't have a pretentious feel to it.
No.
It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like it's going in the art house direction. And again, I think
it could have, though. That's the thing, man.
It could have very easily.
If they had amped up the cinematography by, like, I don't know, just like 8 more points. Yeah. Like you could have done some amazing stuff with this. And there are points that they did do that. They just didn't overdo it. And I think as George Clooney makes more movies like this, I would not be surprised if we do get more stuff like that. But
I hope so, man.
He has the name to be able to get the funding. And if he continues to make movies like this, man, count me in for his next one. Because this is great. I loved this so much. It's such a good movie.
I wish I could remember the last movie he did, but it's a sci-fi movie, and it's basically, and we won't get into it too much because it's not about that, but it's just him and this girl. And they're stranded on like a dying Earth, and it's kind of done in this same way where it's very character driven and it has a very artistic feel to it. And I think this is just Clooney's directing style. I really do. And if this is, like you said, if this is what we're gonna get out of George Clooney as a director, dude, bring more. Please start churning more of these out, because again, I find so often that when you and I go to look for a movie to watch, the only ones I really have fun watching, at least from like a more like popularized standpoint, are the horror movies. And well, maybe not so much that I enjoy. I feel like we have a hard time finding movies to watch and review because so often we go on and we just see the same crap churned out over and over again. It's just whatever's popular at the time. We've got a new version of that, which is really kind of a mirror aspect of what's going on in the video game industry right now, where you found a formula, it works, and so we're going to do that again because it worked the first time. And again, man, I feel like I can't say enough about this movie for people to go watch it, just that they need to go watch this movie. And I know we're in January, but this is my favorite movie of 2022 so far. That I've watched anyway, as far as newer movies goes. In fact, I would say over the last couple months, this is probably my favorite movie that I've watched so far, just because not just of the way that it made me feel, but the fact that it did make me feel. And the fact that it was so refreshing to see something like this.
Yeah, I totally agree. This, like I said earlier, this is the type of movie that, this is the kind of thing that I search for when I'm looking for movies.
Yeah.
Everything that I look for in this movie, it's there. And like you said, I can't speak highly enough about it. I think on a second watch, this will hold up pretty well too. And we watched this on Amazon Prime, and that right there is the biggest problem with this movie. I think it's going to really be held back. Did this get a theatrical release? Do you know?
I don't think so. I don't even know anything about it.
Either way, this is the sort of thing that does hold back movies from being bigger.
Yeah, 100%.
The Manor, when we did The Manor, we'll link that up top right here, right now. When we did The Manor, I kind of felt the same way about it. I don't feel like I rated that super high, but one of the issues is a lot of people aren't going to see that, especially horror fans, because a lot of horror fans are physical collectors. And they won't go towards streaming services. And so you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot by forcing people to have Prime, even though a lot of people already do. A lot of people don't realize Prime Video is even a thing. And burying a movie that is this well made and targeted at the audience that I think it is targeted at, I would love to see this get a Criterion release or something like that.
Yeah.
And who knows if that's ever going to happen, because not only is physical media dying, yes, it is. Whether you like it or not, that's what's happening.
No, unfortunately.
Physical media is dying, and this is the sort of movie that may just not get the attention that it deserves because it's buried on something like Amazon Prime. So,
Well, and I think this is a great example of the argument of why physical media shouldn't die. I mean, I know it's dying because of from a consumer standpoint, and so it just doesn't make financial sense to keep churning out physical copies if people aren't going to buy them. But by putting out a physical copy of this movie, that alone would help it to, even if you don't put it in theaters, that alone would help it to reach more people.
Well, and I think even other services other than just Amazon, I just don't understand the idea of like using a movie like this as a way to sell Amazon Prime Video. Right. I don't think that's the correct way to go, but I don't run Amazon, so what do I know?
Content shouldn't be a means of selling the subscription. The subscription should be a means of selling the content.
And this movie, like you said, should be watched by a lot of people. And unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to happen with this if it only stays on Amazon Prime. And if it did get a theatrical release, that's awesome. But that may be the only life outside of Amazon Prime that it may ever have. So,
well, if anybody from Amazon is listening, if you release a physical copy of this movie, I will buy it.
I will too.
Because this is a movie I want in my collection. I want this movie in my collection.
They don't have it. Okay, yeah. This article said that the Tender Bar is not headed toward DVD or Blu-ray.
That's so unfortunate.
And you and I talked the other day about Windows 11 is now sort of not allowing people to watch 4K content, 4K disc content on Windows anymore either, with specific programs and other stuff. This stuff's dying. And
I just feel like there's this tug of war of companies that are going, no, I want to do it my way. No, I want to do it my way. No, I want to do it my way. And the only ones suffering are the viewers and the content creators.
Yeah. I mean, I watched
It did get a theatrical release, by the way.
It did. Okay, good.
Yeah, I saw that it got a theatrical
hopefully it did well.
release.
I'm not sure, but I will say I watched Dexter New Blood, and I had to sign up for Showtime for that. And after I watched it, other than Yellow Jackets, there is nothing on there that I'm ever going to watch.
No, dude.
And it's the same stuff
way.
I swear, these companies are rotating their movies around from one service to another with these contracts. And I just refuse to play that game, man.
Makes you wonder if it's the distribution companies and not the services.
Who knows, man? I mean, there are definitely contracts with these services with whoever owns the rights to these movies. So I don't want to get onto a whole thing because this could be a whole episode in and of itself, and we'll get sidetracked hard. But okay, well, what would you rate the Tender Bar?
I gotta say,
final thoughts, and
I'm struggling with like 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. I really am. Okay. I really I think this movie was done. I hate to say it, but I think this movie was done perfectly. Like, I can't think of another way. If you do anything different in this movie, it takes away from elements of other aspects of the movie, and I really feel like it's a well-balanced, well-made movie. Everybody did such a good job in this that I got to give it, I'm going to say 9.5 out of 10. But even that, I'm sitting here going I can't find a reason not to give it a 10 out of 10. It's just, it hit me. It made me feel. It made me feel for the characters. It made me care about the characters. It made me want to see more. It made me want to see more movies made by the people that were involved in this movie. I mean, I can't find anything bad to say about it. Like I said, the issues I had weren't things that I would say like made it a
Nitpicky.
bad movie.
Yeah.
They're nitpicky, and and I think by accepting the fact that they were nitpicky and observing from an objective point of view that they're nitpicky, you can automatically you're kind of accepting responsibility for those issues not being issues of the movie, but just being preferential issues.
Yeah, I agree. So my final thoughts on this are, this is amazing. This is, like I said, the reason I watch movies is to find stuff like this.
Yeah.
More than anything that I don't think we've touched on enough is relatability. This movie is so damn relatable.
Yeah.
And regardless of what class you come from, this movie and what year you were born, this movie is very relatable. And it is hard to make something that I think is this relatable and do it this intelligently.
Yeah.
My biggest issue that I did have with it is the cinematography could have been better. And I think that's something that not only their cinematographer, they did a great job, amazing job even. I would have liked to have seen more wide shots. And this movie is so full of mid and close and is missing so much wide that it's almost insufferable because of it. There are so many moments where when I was watching this, I was like, a wide shot would have gone perfect here. And that's sort of my only gripe about the cinematography, though. It's not wide open all the time. It's not completely blown out with bokeh. And that is how you know somebody knows what the hell they are doing. It's not just... Go ahead.
I would say a lot of the mid shots and the close up shots. I mean, I don't know this. I'm just spitballing here. I would say that the reason for that is because you do have so much natural lighting in this movie that by doing shots like that, it gives you more control over the lighting through the camera.
Yeah. I'm talking more about like more to aid the story. And that's what I mean. Like, for instance, the example I keep turning over in my head is when he meets, what's her name for the first time?
Sydney
for the first time. He walks away and there's this shot of his friends hanging out right there, when you could have done an amazing wide shot there and watched them separate off the screen.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's so many moments like that in this movie that I felt like you could do a little bit more with what they had as far as the content of the shot goes. They could have helped marry the cinematography to it a little bit more. And that's something that's going to come from George Clooney the more he does movies like this. Mm-hmm. He has worked with Wes Anderson and some other really great directors. And so he knows how this stuff goes. And this movie, more than anything, showed me that he is a very, very capable director. And that blew my mind. And Ben Affleck, I didn't see Ben Affleck in Uncle Charlie at all.
No.
And he kills it in this movie, and overall I just loved it. And despite the orange and teal look of this film, it's fantastic. And I will rate this an 8 out of 10. There are some things that I do not like about it. It's a little bit long. We hang on to some stuff a little bit more than we should. We don't get into some stuff as much as I would like. And but with all that being said, it's very, very close to perfection. This is up there with Sideways and Life Aquatic and all of my favorite more art house movies. And like you said, it made me feel it's relatable, and it is a universal story of families and how families can screw you up and the physical act of overcoming all of that. And I love it. Yeah. It's great. It's got so much to say, and everyone should see this. That's how I feel about this movie.
Yeah, I loved it so much that I want to thank George Clooney for making it. Like, seriously, like, thank you for making this movie. Thank you for giving us something. Like, I love that this is how I get to start off 2022 with a new movie. and not just another Aquaman or Avengers movie or another Star Wars movie. I love that this is how we're starting. I don't think it's going to be indicative of how the year is going to go with movies, but I'm just really glad that this is how I get to start off 2022 with a new movie.
Well, I'll tell you what it does do, despite this being on Amazon Prime, if this is the kind of movies that the people are greenlighting over at Amazon, they're going to have some serious success with me anyway. Because if this is any indication of the type of quality movie that you guys are going to be making, wow.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
all
for
I
real.
can say is wow.
For real.
So, okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and call the podcast there for today. If you guys like this, make sure you hit the like button. If you really liked it, make sure you hit the subscribe button. What are your thoughts on this movie? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Let us know down in the comments. Brett and I are pretty good about checking comments, and if you leave something that is not utter drivel, we will respond. And let's have a conversation about how you felt about in this movie. What did you think about the stuff we just talked about? Let's have a conversation. So thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next time on From the Deep. Bye-bye.
Ta-ta.